I'm Maria Rosalina Baritugo, currently teaching chemistry subjects in Cebu Doctors University, especially for students who are taking paramedical courses like medical technology, RS, nursing, and other courses as well. So I grew up in a province in Lutupan. Of course, it's a province, so we are surrounded by trees, but that area was already a little bit populated because of the mining, no? Atlas Mining, if you have heard about it, Atlas Mining Corporation. So different people from other areas in Mindanao and other areas in Visayas work there in Atlas Mining Corporation. So my father worked as professional driver sa mga dagko kaya nga mga sakyanan. And then after that, when I was grade 4, no, kung sa manang edad ang grade 4, so we transferred to Manila, and then I stayed in Manila for like until 19 years old, no, pagka manibalik na sad ko sa Cebu, but it was a different scenario already because I stayed in the city itself. So it was not yet the same nga sa Manila, pero nag-start na siya o bloom, no, kanang nagkahinay-hinay na siya ka urban. So at that time, when I arrived around 1993, na-open ang SM City Cebu as well as the Ayala Center. So the people have a certain area kung asa mag-meet up, dinner, or unlike before, no, nga wala. Before 1990s, mga 1980s, wala pa na yung mga big malls in Cebu except in Colon area. Pero dili gihapon, murag mga gagmay lang nga stores. When martial law was declared in 1972, how did you first find out, and what was the immediate reaction or feeling in your household and school? So I was born in 1974, so of course 2 years old. I don't have any idea on what was happening around during martial law, but pag grade school na nako, no, grade 1, I don't know, before ko na grade 1 na kindergarten, there was an order, good, no, like curfew was being implemented, walay crimes, no, nga madungog, and it was really, with an order, na discipline ang mga people. And unsa ni kaning household and school. So pag grade 6 na nako until grade 6, grade 1 to grade 4, so far, Nutriban, it's like a bun, burger, more siya burger, pero it's a bun lang. Pero with the nutritious bun. So gitawag siya Nutriban. It was distributed like to all of the students for free. So ang mga dili ka afford, for those who can't afford to bring any snacks or to buy any snacks, we have a full stomach, inid-uli na mo sa balay because of the Nutriban. And then there was another project also by the government, which we call it Bulgur. So it's an oatmeal, medyo dark in colors, and then for students, we were given tasks to add coconut milk, a little bit of sugar. So dili me dili siya kanang gutom, no, kung adto mi og school. So wala gyud kana, I mean, if naa kay parents and you know that your kids are fed, so you will be happy, no, maski gamay lang ang salary sa ako ang parents. But ingon ato ako ang nakuanha na experience, no, kanang ito sa program nga, I think it's from from Luzon to Mindanao, that all of the students who are enrolled in a government school will be fed with Nutriban and bulgur, which is a kind of an oatmeal. So kana wala ko nagutom, no, I feel healthy as well during that time. So bata pa man sad po ko sa pamani. National textbooks often focus heavily on what happened in Manila. From your memory, what did martial law actually look like on the ground here in Cebu, like the curfew, media censorship, or local resistance protests like the noise barrages? Pila man akong age kida ani, so gamay bata pa man ko, but again, I told you, no, nga we transferred to Manila, and I was so shocked at the time that when I saw EDSA, the Epifanio de los Santos Avenue, na-shock ko kay wala ka nice. I mean, I saw double-decker na mga bus. Color niya is blue, and we call it Metro Manila Transit Bus, MMTC, Metro Manila Transit Bus Corporation, MMTC, run by the government. And there was this logo, just like the 01K jeep bitaw nga love bus, but the original love bus yun kay we're running in EDSA road, and it was a big bus, double decker na uban dili, but it seems like, no, nga ma-compare na ako pareha siya Hong Kong kanang ingon ana. And then in terms of curfews, so far wala man kaayo dagkong reklamo. I mean, we were happy, akong parents makafeel og safe, no, nga na curfews. And then in terms of media censorship, siguro na because we were still poor at that time, we don't have television, so dili kaayo ko aware about the censorship. But I think the main purpose of having the martial law was to control the leftist or kining mga rebelde, no, mao toy yahang purpose na nung ang implementation of martial law. Pero ako as a citizen, I did not feel any kanang hardship, no, at that time. Naka-feel ko nga maayo ang lugar, because at that time I saw Food Terminal Incorporated or FTI in Taguig, wherein dagko kay ni siya nga warehouse, bananas from Mindanao, tuna from I think Jensan, naa siya dagko kaayo nga warehouse nga dito na sa i-process. I mean, makain ko ba nga, it was nice, no, at that time. Wala man siya problema ato nga time. But siguro, sa others, politics. Pero ako, as an ordinary citizen, wala ko naka-feel o kanang hardship, no, at that particular time. As an educator, did you feel or witness any restrictions on academic freedom, speech, or what could be discussed in classrooms during those years? I think this question, kung ako ay mo pangutanon, napaman ko sa grade school. So, dili ako ang teach. Pero sa ako mga teachers, so far, wala may kanang, ang sa tawag ani, kanang restriction. Although they don't talk about martial law, but from what I can remember, we were given not leaflet, but mura siya sort of a thin book, and we call it current events. So kung wala yung mga televisions ang household sa mga students, naami basahon nga current events, not only about politics but about sciences ug unsa na din ha. So we are informed of what was happening like outside the country. Imagine maka-memorize may kinsa mga president sa other countries unsay nahitabo dere dito sa science ana. So in that way, wala pa si social media, but we have this not textbook but a handbook nga na dito we current events. So wala, siguro probably left behind ang information relay, but at least we were informed, no? I don't know lang if there was manipulation, because wala pa man sad ko nakasabot about the politics at that time.
Mrs. Barritugo's oral account relates to the declaration of martial law when President Ferdinand E. Marcos signed Proclamation No. 1081 on September 21, 1972, placing the Philippines under military rule, an act described as a self-coup disguised in legal terms. Her memories as a working-class child reflects the broader national experience under authoritarian rule and the regime's effort to project an image of order and social welfare. Her recollection of curfews, feeding programs, and discipline aligned with the Marcos administration's portrayal of the martial law as necessary for restoring order amid rebellion and lawlessness. This sense of safety her family experienced reflects the controlled public image maintained by the regime, especially in communities less affected by direct political repression.
Mrs. Barritugo's memories of the Nutriban and Bulgar programs also connect to the regime's welfare narrative. However, the Nutriban project was actually initiated by the United States Agency for International Development, not the Marcos administration. It was intended to address child malnutrition and provide emergency food assistance. The Marcos government nevertheless claimed credit for the program, turning it into part of its propaganda machinery. Her movement from Latopan, Toledo City, Cebu to Manila and back to Cebu in 1993 also reflects the wider social and economic disruptions of the martial law era. Cebu experienced both hardship and resistance, with many Cebuanos arrested during the dictatorship. Thus, Mrs. Barritugo's positive memories contrast sharply with the documented experiences of repression in Cebu.
Ms. Barritugo's account is valuable because it reflects the perspective of a civilian child witness, though it must be interpreted critically. Her memories were shaped by her age, working class background, and limited political awareness. She admitted that she had no idea what was happening and didn't understand about the politics at that time, highlighting the limits of her testimony. Oral history can be unreliable due to memory gaps, yet personal recollection remain important in understanding history. Historians note that collective memory is shaped by both personal experience and broader social influence, according to the focus on the Global South. Thus, her positive memories represent a partial truth influenced by age, privilege, and selective memory.
So Mrs. Barritugo's recollection of curfews matches documented martial law policies, including restrictions from midnight to 4 a.m., which reflected tighter military control and surveillance. So her sense of safety and order also aligns with how some non-activist communities initially experienced the regime. However, her narrative omits the violence and repression widely documented in Cebu, where many people faced detention, torture, and death under military rule. Amnesty International reported that over 100,000 people were actually victims of martial law abuses from 1971 to 1981. So these realities are absent not because she denies them, but because her social position shielded her from direct exposure. Her belief that the Nutriban was a Marcos government initiative that also differs from historical records. Although the program did aim to address malnutrition, it was later used as propaganda by the Marcos regime, leading to mixed public memories of it. Despite such feeding programs, around 2.7 million Filipino children still remained underweight or malnourished in 1977, which somehow contradicts the purpose of the program. So several biases shape her account, including positional bias, childhood memory bias, and possible influence from recent pro-Marcos nostalgic narratives that resurfaced in the 2010s. Still, her perspective remains historically important because it represents the experiences of ordinary working-class families whose voices are often absent from formal historiography.
Conducting and analyzing this oral history interview showed that history is not monolithic. While documented history described martial law as a period of repression, abuse, and corruption, Mrs. Bartugu's account reflects a childhood of relative contentment. Both realities can coexist because historical experiences differ according to class, age, geography, and social exposure. Ignoring systemic oppression simply because one was not directly affected misunderstands the nature of inequality. This process highlighted the importance of examining oral testimonies alongside formal historical records. The interview also showed the need to contextualize oral accounts rather than simply accept or reject them. Mrs. Bartugu's belief that Nutriban was a government gift reflects how the Marcos regime presented itself to ordinary citizens, making her memory historically significant in understanding state propaganda. Oral history reveals lived experiences that written sources often cannot. While documents record arrests, policies, and economic data, oral testimonies capture daily realities such as a child eating bulgur with coconut milk or a family feeling safe at night. These accounts provide insight into fear, resilience, and everyday life during martial law, making them essential for preserving historical memory. Oral testimonies also recover marginalized perspectives, especially from provincial and working-class communities often absent from official archives. This is important because martial law remains poorly discussed in many textbooks and among younger generations. However, oral accounts also have limitations. Selective memory, childhood innocence, lack of media access, geographic mobility, and the long passage of time may shape or distort recollections. In the Philippine context, selective remembering has also been influenced by revived pro-Marcos narratives and cultural memory reconstruction. Thus, Mrs. Bartugu's account could be misinterpreted as support for the regime instead of a partial perspective shaped by her social position. Despite these limitations, her testimony remains historically valuable because it represents the experiences of ordinary Filipinos who neither resisted nor directly suffered under the dictatorship, yet form an important part of the regime's social base.